Whispered Words Sharpen Knives. A Changeling the Lost story.
Jacoby!
Amy Prism cried out, her voice loud enough to be heard over the thumping bass of the party. The fairest was a vibrant rainbow, magic flooding her magenta locks and dancing in her oil-slick eyes. Her skin shifted like a mood ring, and her hedge-spun raiment, a surprisingly tasteful dress with a pair of impossibly high shoes, swirled in the opposite direction on the color spectrum. She bounced across the dance floor, stopping just short of throwing her arms around the ogre where he sat. It was as if she'd remembered at the last moment that some protective contracts didn't differentiate friend from foe.
I didn't think you'd make it.
Jacoby glanced around the room. The spring cotillion was in full swing, with courtiers milling about, renewing old pledges, and seeking new desires. Most had dressed to impress, slipping into enchanted threads or fey-forged armor, looking to see and be seen. In deference to the event, Jacoby had put on a clean shirt, and he wore a heavy leather patch over the pit of scars where his missing eye used to be.
"I see you made it in one piece,"
Jacoby said, tossing back the drink he'd poured for himself before setting the glass aside.
I wouldn't miss it,
The polychromatic said, deftly sidestepping Jacoby's reference to the meat market. Spring's perfume danced on her breath, and her mantle twined round her shoulders, boasting phantom flowers. She leaned a little closer to the ogre, lowering her voice even as her smile grew wider.
I heard the most delicious rumor about you.
"If it's so sweet, keep it behind your teeth,"
Jacoby said. Amy shook her head, bright curls of hair bouncing as she put her hands on the arms of Jacoby's chair so he couldn't get up.
Lucius Frakes came to your hollow not all that long ago, and he never goes anywhere near the hedge, unless it's something really important.
"Then how do you know that?"
Jacoby asked.
A little birdie told me.
Amy said, dropping Jacoby a wink.
So, what brought Autumn's personal scarecrow knocking on your door?
Jacoby's frown deepened. When Amy's motley maid had hired him to find a gateway to the dark market, the spring courtier had been on his turf. Now, surrounded by music and lights, with wine flowing and laughter in the air, the summer court loner knew he was out of his element. The Ferris knew it too. Jacoby scanned the room one more time before he returned his attention to Amy.
"You really want to know?"
Jacoby asked.
I do.
Amy said, tucking her hair back behind her ear.
Very much.
"All right.
Jacoby said, rubbing at his crooked nose.
You didn't hear this from me, but he came to make me a proposal."
What sort of proposal?
Amy asked.
"He might have said that if I gave him Wolf, then he could pull a few strings to make me the Paladin of Shadows."
Amy's gasp was audible, even over the music. A hand flew to her mouth and her eyes flashed bright yellow for a moment.
What did you say?
She asked, leaning in a little closer, almost despite herself.
"Would you do me a kindness and get me another?"
Jacoby asked, nudging his empty glass with a hand.
I suppose I could.
Amy said, plucking the oversized glass up and holding it in two hands.
Don't tell me. Let me guess. Something neat and nasty.
"You got it in one,"
Jacoby said, giving her a smile that felt more like a grimace.
Back in a flash.
Amy said, turning and slipping through the crowd in the general direction of the bar. Jacoby leaned back in his seat, keeping his frown on his face. It was common knowledge that ever since Black Shuck had stepped down from his duty as the Autumn Court's paladin several years ago, that there hadn't been anyone to fill the role. It had been a problem that Lucius had tried to stem by throwing ensorcelled mortals at any issue that reared its head, but there were some threats that needed one of the lost to deal with. While it had been whispered that Fall would eventually deign to reach out to another court for help, relations had been chilly ever since Lucius had become the power behind the Autumn Crown. From the outside looking in, it would make sense that Lucius would come to someone from the Summer Court to fill the role of enforcer. It also made sense that he would look for an outsider who came and went like the wind, and who everyone knew about, but almost nobody could say they were close to. The summer season was coming up fast as well, and Lucius needed Wolf in hand if he was going to do anything before Roar sat the throne again and could arbitrate the matter directly. If Lucius was going to settle his business himself, he'd need to start cutting deals, and Lucius liked to do his wheeling and dealing out of sight whenever possible. He could have come to Jacoby's doorstep with such an offer. He hadn't, but only Jacoby and Lucius knew that for certain. The idea that he could have, though, would be a thorn in Lucius's side, poisoning his pursuit of Wolf, and making even more people distrustful of the Autumn Courtier. Jacoby hadn't told a lie, not exactly, but he had marked a misleading trail that would be all too easy for people to wander down of their own volition, if they weren't careful. The ogre watched Amy as she moved through the gathered crowd. He read her lips as she whispered to her fellow Spring, and passed the news along. She wasn't as empty-headed as she made herself out to be, just as he'd suspected. He watched as the bartender poured a generous helping of bourbon into the glass before she made her way back through the crowd.
As requested,
Amy said. Jacoby took the glass, giving it a swirl as he sniffed. No magic, no poisons, no uppers. It would be a bad look to slip a doctored drink to another court at your own event, but he checked out of habit. He took a long sip. The music changed to something on the lighter side. Amy tilted her head to the left, watching him.
Rumor is you don't dance.
Rumor is true.
He answered, setting down his glass.
I'll give you that one for free.